I'm coming to you while sick with a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy theory I've cooked up out of my sick mind. I'm locked in this room. I have a fever, and I have visions. And I think I finally understand what happened between Atletico Madrid and Inter on Wednesday. Now I'm gonna need you to put the tinfoil hat on, break it out, roll it up into whatever hat shape you want, slide that on your dome, because it is time to take a dive into the wild side. Now, if you are not familiar with what happened between Inter and Atletico Madrid, they ended up level on aggregate and on the score sheet. It was 3-3 on aggregate. Yes, I'm right. It was 1-0 Inter in the first match, and then it was, honestly, I don't know. I can't interpret this site. It makes absolutely no sense. Sorry, it was 3-2 on aggregate, but it was 2-2. Okay, it was 2-2 on aggregate, right? Because Atletico Madrid won the second leg 2-1 at home. Inter won 1-0 at home. So this site just presents the penalty win as another goal. Atletico Madrid went down 1-0. Inter, if you didn't know, having an absolute ball buster of a season. They are running Italy. They're the best team in Italy by a mile and a half since the Roman Empire, right? They are cooking with the sauce. They're like 80 points ahead. So they were the team. If anybody from Italy was going to win the Champions League this year, it was Inter. They were probably the most likely team since those Juventus teams that actually were right up against the final. But Atletico Madrid's Atletico Madrid. And I think my conspiracy theory revolves around Atletico Madrid's mastery of the dark arts, right? Simeone is basically Voldemort. He's the Dark Lord, okay? He is a guy that understands all of the little moments in the game. We're talking about the guy, which I didn't know this until I watched the Beckham documentary, that actually drew the red card off of David Beckham, that famous red card in the World Cup that David Beckham got. Diego Simeone was the one that drew it. He is the master of this stuff, and I think he's got a particularly impressive move. And it has to do with the penalty shootout. Because in the penalty shootout, first take was Sharanoglu. He made it. And then Depay made it. And then we had consecutive misses from Inter. Sanchez and Klaassen. And then, of course, Lautaro Martinez, who has to embody his own meme. He missed the last penalty. Now, it's these three misses that we will be focusing on. Atletico Madrid went 3 for 4. Okay. Now, I have been provided with a camera angle. We will start with Alexis Sanchez's penalty. And you're going to notice... No, we're not. We're going to start with Lautaro Martinez's penalty. And you are going to notice something. Probably because I'm going to point it out to you. But you might notice it on your own. Just watch the ball. Are you still watching? Keep your eyes on the ball. Now, what I want you to envision as you watch this, I want you to imagine that there is somebody directly under the penalty spot on the field with a pole. And right as Lautaro gets to the ball, they go, boop. That's what I want you to imagine. Now, watch the ball. This isn't a magic trick. It jumps. The ball jumps up. The ball jumps up. And Lautaro, obviously, as you can tell, gets under it. And then very telling, the first thing he does, he looks back at the penalty spot. That ball moved. People that kick the ball professionally all the time, they have an understanding of how they can expect the ball to come off their foot when they kick it. And he is surprised, obviously, by the way that ball came off his foot. This was the decisive penalty. This miss sent Atletico Madrid to the quarterfinal of the Champions League, right? We're not talking about chump change here. Now, my initial interpretation was the one that I just shared with you, that there is literally, it looks like there is a dude under the field with a pole that just boops it. Right, that somehow Diego Simeone had managed to get a very well-trained individual directly under the penalty spot to slightly boop the ball. And then right as they disappear, the grass comes back over and you never even know that the pole was there. Right, but I was researching this further. That's not the conspiracy theory that I'm going to lean on. Because this is not the only time that this happened. The first one I saw was Lautaro, but here is Klaassen's miss. Watch the ball. It moves to the side. Now, that little movement can make a huge difference. So instead of moving up, it just shifts to the side a little bit. And you get a much clearer picture of why from what happens when his other foot hits the ground. Watch what happens when Klaassen's foot hits his plant foot for the shot hits the ground. So we're watching that plant foot. Boom. It hits the ground, and you see the turf move. It's like the turf is above the actual ground, right? The grass, the pitch, whatever. It's not actual like AstroTurf, right? That is grass. You can see the piece of grass flying around. But you see it like it's not fully attached to the ground. It shifts. This time it shifts to the side. And then if you watch Alexis Sanchez, I believe Alexis Sanchez just missed this penalty, but you will see the grass move again, right? You're going to see it move again. It doesn't move the ball, but you see it move. You see his plant foot shift, which is another thing that can really throw you off. Now, I am aware there is always going to be some sort of infinitesimal movement, right? Because we're dealing with like actual earth and ground here. We're not playing on cement that's not moving ever. And in that regard, the Alexis Sanchez one is the least conspicuous of the three. But allow me to let you inside the tinfoil house now, because I believe, with no evidence at all, that Atletico Madrid was responsible for this. Now, you know, if you followed me on stuff long enough, I don't have a club, right? I root for the U.S. national team, but when we were all in fourth grade picking our Premier League clubs, I picked Sunderland. They got relegated twice, and I was like, you know what? I just don't have a team, right? I was like, I'm American. My hometown doesn't have a club in MLS, and I'll just watch and be a fan of the game. So I'm not like a homer for Inter here. I have no reason to go to bat for Inter. In this, if any reason, I would go to bat against them because Christian Pulisic's playing at AC Milan and I want to make the Americans look good. But I believe, with no evidence, that Atletico Madrid had something to do with this. Even if they didn't, I also believe that if you were a manager, this is something that you could plan. And it could be genius. So follow this plan. Follow my elaborate weave here. The web I shall weave. Diego Simeone prepares the area around the penalty spot. And let's say a couple days before the match, puts in a new piece of turf. At the very least, make sure that that grass isn't fully attached to the ground, right? And then, let's say you win the coin toss, and you get to choose which end you're shooting at. Because I know what you're thinking. Well, they're both going to be shooting from the same end. How's this going to matter? Well, it does matter a lot if your penalty takers know where to step, because the other guy don't. He don't know where to step at all, right? But if you are aware that this is an issue, the potential issue that you've created for the opposition, that Diego Simeone, I believe, might have just created here. I mean, did you see the final penalty? The jump caused by the plant foot of Lautaro Martinez, bobbling the ball up, causing him to get under it. That's a huge deal. That is a match-winning home field advantage. If you go through that process of making sure the grass around the penalty spot is separated from the ground, no good root systems, this is fresh grass, right? This pitch is gorgeous from above, but when you plant in that particular area, it slides a bit. If you are able to practice and explain to your team how to properly take a penalty without sliding and bouncing and jostling the ball all over the place, whether you bounce it up like Lautaro, whether you knock it to the side like Davy Clausen, if you're able to practice that or at least run through it before the match, like, hey, when you take your penalty, come straight on. Don't come in with any sideways momentum. It's going to crumple the grass up and launch the ball up. You need to come in with straight on momentum. Or you need to make sure that your plant foot is wide. And then maybe the day before in practice, you work on having your plant foot wide. Because you're taking penalties from the same spot. You need to know how to take them safely, but they don't. This is a match-winning tactic. And I believe, with no evidence, that Diego Simeone has done this. I think he's capable of this. I think these are the little things between the lines that make great managers like Jose Mourinho explaining to the ball boy how to get a proper restart. And that literally ends up creating a goal for his team, right? That is such a famous example of this. Jurgen Klopp trying to point it out that other teams, the grass length is a little higher, which, it's easy to make fun of in a press conference, but that makes sense. It's harder to play with higher technical quality when the grass length is longer. There's all those little things that managers and clubs can do to try and create a home field advantage. Well, if you know you've got a European knockout tie and penalties, maybe even just a penalty during the match, could be the difference between hundreds of millions of dollars, between the greatest success in your club's history and complete and utter abject failure. Diego Simeone wins a lot of games for a reason. And I would be very surprised, personally, sitting on my zero evidence, if he didn't know about this. If he didn't know this was part of the field. If he wasn't at least vaguely aware that this was a possibility, and it was perhaps discussed with the penalty takers that we're taking for Atletico Madrid. Now, obviously, it is still difficult, but if you are aware that this is a problem, and the other team is not, it is a huge advantage. And even if Diego Simeone did not do this, even if he was not responsible for this at all, I think managers should do it in the future. Really hard to get caught doing that. If you keep this in a really small circle, it's really hard to get caught doing that. Really hard to prove it. Really hard to say it was illegal. This is an excellent opportunity to raise the grass by a quarter inch, to teach the ball boys, to make sure that penalty spot is more friendly to you in your confines and particularly unfriendly to the opponent. This is my favorite conspiracy theory that I have uncovered in a long time. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be on the lookout. I will be watching every penalty shootout at Atletico Madrid in slow motion with a close-up. We must get to the bottom of this. Diego, honestly, I respect the hell out of this move. Goodbye. Until next time. Unless they find me.